Do you remember your first 3D platformer? Well, I do. I love platforming games. Some of my favorite games are platformers. Going through unique environments and making your way to the end of the level is fun. The controls and gimmicks that come from platformers is what gives each of them their own unique charm. My favorite part of platformers is trying to get to the best time in a level. That is why I love Sonic games. Zooming through levels, reaching the end as fast as possible, is most of the time really difficult and provides a ton of challenges. Sonic games have always been some of my favorite games, and this all started out with my first Sonic game, Soniccolors. Sonic in the 2000s was not doing well. Many games such as Shadow the Hedgehog, Sonic 06, and Sonic Unleashed got terrible reviews. Many people were complaining about the heavy use of gimmicks and the low amount of polish. With Shadow the Hedgehog making Shadow use a gun and a terrible and a confusing story. Sonic 06 being filled with bugs and people complaining about the multiple characters being unfun to play as. And Sonic Unleashed having great day stages that many people compliment, but having a gimmick that turns Sonic into a werehog at night, with lengthy and unfun stages that many people complained about. As you can tell from the reviews, people were not happy about how Sonic was doing at the time. Even if some of those games were good, the more important thing is what the reviews say. And they don't say good things. It is obvious that Sonic needed a change, and 2010 would be the year for that. Soniccolors was released November 11th, 2010 in PAL regions, November 16th in North America, and November 18th in Japan for the Nintendo Wii. Releasing to generally positive reviews, it was a lot higher than the 60 that Sonic Unleashed got. Soniccolors takes place in Eggman's interstellar amusement park, with Sonic trying to stop Eggman's evil plan, even though Eggman is quote-unquote no longer evil. This game is split up into 7 planets, each with their own unique designs, gimmicks, music, 6 acts, and a boss act. The first world in Soniccolors is Tropical Resort, the center of the amusement park. It's covered with palm trees and walkways, with incredible views of Earth. This world is a change from the default grassland that is typical with the first world of Sonic games. The first act is a breeze that can be completed quickly and teaches the main controls and abilities of Sonic well, showing off the boost, homing attack, grinding, sliding, 2D sections, and the quick time events. Act 1 is a great showcase of how Sonic controls, that doesn't overstay its welcome. Act 2 is more of the same, with some trickier platforming and a slower pace. This level makes sure you understand the controls and ability of Sonic, and kinda stands as a test to make sure that you are ready for the rest of the game. Once you complete Act 2, a cutscene is played that reveals one of the biggest changes to the Sonic formula, being the story. Unlike previous entries, Soniccolors is full of jokes, and does not take itself that seriously. The cutscene shows us that Tails does not think the park is part of an evil plot. Well, Sonic does, and it shows us how they got into the amusement park. Then, the cutscene ends with Sonic and Tails trying to help some aliens from getting captured by Orbot and Cubot, with Sonic getting powers from one of the aliens leading straight into Act 3. Laser! Act 3 introduces the main gimmick of the game, the Wisps. The Wisps are aliens that give Sonic powers. This act gives the player the Cyan Wisp, which has the laser power. Upon activating, you can aim in a direction and Sonic will shoot forward in that direction. If you aim at a blue crystal, Sonic will bounce from that direction into other crystals until you reach the other side, typically leading to secrets or a shortcut. Act 3 is basically Act 2, but longer and with a tutorial for the Cyan Wisp. Acts 4, 5, and 6 are all challenge stages that are mainly 2D and introduce really nothing new. After Act 4, a cutscene plays, which shows Tails trying to communicate with the Wisps using a translator he has created. Once you complete every act in the world, the boss act is revealed. The boss act opens with a cutscene where Eggman reveals his plan to harness the power of the Wisps to take over the world in front of Sonic. So Eggman releases the big boy, which is the first boss. This boss is really easy and can be completed in less than 30 seconds. In this boss, you must run around a Ferris wheel to make it on the platforms to hit the eye in the center of the wheel. Once you hit it 3 times, the boss is defeated. The final cutscene of the world plays, and then after a few errors with Tails' translator, he can tell us what the Wisp is talking to. Is named Yacker, and they need to destroy generators on different planets to free the aliens and save them. Then as Orbot and Cubot are cleaning up, one of the arms from the robot is launched into the tall towers in the middle of the park, creating a hole. Tropical Resort is a great introduction to Soniccolours that helps set the tone for how the rest of the game is played. Once you complete Tropical Resort, you can choose to play either Sweet Mountain or Starlight Carnival. I always pick Sweet Mountain. Sweet Mountain is a planet made entirely of candy and sweets, from the chocolate river in the mountains made of different types of cakes, to rockets that are full of jelly beans. This world is a ton of sweet surprises, and Act 1 is no different. Act 1 is a nice, long act that has a great balance between speed and platforming, which shows off the world's gimmicks well. This act has a section where you must dodge a rocket full of jelly beans, with the lower section being safe from it, but also being slower, followed by a drift section, and then a 2D section which introduces the Yellow Wisp, which has the drill power. The drill power allows you to dig into the ground and travel around the underneath of the level. This can help you find secrets and rings. There's a cool secret section that you can find by using the drill power, and then one final section of dodging rockets full of jelly beans, and then the level is complete. Act 2 begins right from where Act 1 ended, starting with a drift section, and then a neat section where you must climb to the top of a burger statue, leading to the end of the level. Act 2 is really short, and once it starts to get good, it ends. Act 3 opens with a long boost section, where you go straight until you either make your way onto the rail or defeat a bunch of enemies to continue into a 2D area. This 2D contains falling jelly bean rockets, and an introduction to the Orange Wisp, the Rocket Wisp. The Rocket Wisp allows you to launch straight up into the air, like a rocket. The level then has a drift section that continues the 2D section for a little bit until you reach the drift area again, and then the end of the level. Both acts are quite short with little sections, although they have a few unique ideas that do not last long enough to showcase them. Act 4 is a medium-length level focused solely on 2D that focuses on navigating rotating laser blades. In this act, you must stand on buttons to rotate the lasers so you can walk through them without losing your rings. This act does a good job of introducing a concept and using it in different ways, although it is a little too short. The next level is even shorter, testing the player's skill on platforming, then using a lollipop you can homing attack onto in order to spin around and jump off at the right time to prepare yourself to a high platform. The last act in the world has yellow blocks that can be broken by these enemies with a laser gun, or by Sonic on a jump pad, or by stomping. Then the boss act is unlocked. Boss act shows us a tractor beam that Sonic must destroy, after he's interrupted by a pirate, which begins the boss. This boss is quite unique, starting on a pirate ship, where you must homing attack onto candies to avoid the bombs. Then you make it to a lever, which once flipped will fling you outside of the ship, and then you can attack the pirate head on. You can hit the boss by defeating its minions to stun it, and then boosting into the boss. Once you do this, you go back on the ship to repeat the same process. Each time gets a little more difficult. Defeating the boss plays a cutscene that shows the same generator being disabled and Tails telling us about Hyper Go-On energy, which is apparently the life force of the Wisps, and that is what Eggman is using for his evil purpose. The cutscene is also where Eggman is first called Baldy Nosehair, which has appeared in Sonic Lost World and the television show Sonic Boom after this. Sweet Mountain is one of the coolest zones in a Sonic game, but most of the levels fall short due to how short they are. While I enjoy the theming of this zone, the level design is not that good. The world following Sweet Mountain is Starlight Carnival. Starlight Carnival is my favorite world, based solely on presentation. Starlight Carnival is not exactly a planet, but a bunch of bright, glowing spaceships, close together. I love this world. The design, the music, the theming are all some of my favorites. Starting out strong, Act 1 begins inside, the camera flipping to be upside down. Then running outside where you can see the constellation of spaceships in the sky. Running on a holographic platform, dodging right next to spaceships. Then an enemy comes onto the path, using the quick step to dodge its attacks until they run into a spaceship. Afterwards, the path ends, and you must homing attack onto these floating walls as you get launched back onto the path, wall jumping off the exterior ships until you get inside, where there is a 2D section. The floor of the inside is made of all sorts of colors, and this section introduces you to the Blue Wisp, which lets you use the cube power. The cube power slams Sonic into the ground, making the blue coins into blocks, and the blue blocks into blue coins. The player must use this power to make his way to the skydiving section, falling outside and onto the platform, where a bunch of motobugs drive on this holographic platform, and you have to defeat them by quick stepping into them. After that section, you enter another spaceship, where you have to dodge falling ceiling and make it back outside, running straight to the goal. This level does an amazing job of introducing this zone and the mechanics. Act 2 expands upon the mechanics introduced in Act 1 by showing how the cube can break certain blocks when used near them. Although this act is only a short challenge, it expands upon the groundwork from Act 1 well. Act 3 makes use of the yellow springs, which move along a path following Sonic. This level is slow, with the majority of the time being spent waiting for this spring. Act 4 then uses a ball which shoots out green projectiles in every direction, challenging the player to either risk it to go fast or take it safe to get a worse time. Act 5 begins with the same as Act 1, but it is a little more difficult because the dodge time between attacks is a little shorter. The level continues with a skydiving section that leads into a 2D section. You have to climb to the top of the level using the green wisp. Hover. The green wisp is hover ability, which allows Sonic to float in the direction the player is moving and light dash into ring trails. Once you climb to the top, there's a zip line that leads to a 3D section with holographic platforms, and then you have to climb to the top of another 3D section, making use of the hover ability in 3D. And that is where you reach the end of the goal. This level is great. It does a great job of being long enough with enough substance to challenge the player. Act 6 is a level where you have to climb up to the top, making use of all the skills you have. It uses the green wisp to get to the top, and while it is quite short, it does a good job of testing your skills with the hover ability. After Act 6 is completed, Boss Act is unlocked. A cutscene plays before the Boss Act, which I have a lot to complain about. This cutscene has Sonic and Tails walking towards the generator, where they say, "Eggman could be anywhere." Then Eggman is revealed behind the generator, waiting for them to get closer. Once Sonic and Tails get close enough to the generator, Eggman zaps Tails with his mind control ray, revealing Eggman's evil plan to use the alien energy to mind control the world. Then, the machine just runs out of energy, and Eggman tells one of the ships to attack Sonic. The idea of Eggman using mind control to make Sonic and Tails fight each other is such a cool boss idea. But this never happens. This could have returned at the end of the game for a fight right before the final boss, but that isn't what happens. The fight that does follow it, though, is really fun. Dodging its attacks and boosting until you can hit the ship is engaging, and it takes the fast-paced nature of Sonic into full effect. Then you must dodge it in 2D with homing attack. Attacking the ship slowly breaks it, which can visually be seen throughout the fight. This fight was great, although my first time beating the game, I kept dying during this boss, and it took me around 40 minutes to beat. Bear in mind, I was very young. The cutscene that plays after defeating the boss says that Eggman is using the generators to collect the wisps, and there are 5 more of them. Since you have defeated 2 of them already, that tells us that there are only 3 more left. Following that is a cutscene of Eggman saying that the mind control bean is almost full of energy. Once the cutscenes are over, the next 3 worlds are unlocked. Planet Wisp is one of the worlds that follows Starlight Carnival, and it is not your typical grassy plain with trees and plants, but it is a place that Eggman is building bright orange factories on top, contrasting with the green of the plants. You can tell that Eggman is harming the planet because the water has been polluted with purple goop that kills you upon touch. Act 1 begins with Sonic rushing in the open field until he runs into Eggman's construction using the quick step and other buildings Eggman has made to dodge the purple goo. Then Sonic grinds on rails until there is a 2D section which introduces the pink wisp, the spike. The spike power allows Sonic to stick onto walls and the ceiling. Reaching the end of the 2D section, there's a path with a lot of holes you have to quick step away from, not to fall into a pit. Afterwards, there's a 2D section which makes use of the rocket and spike powers to make it up walls until you reach the end of the level. Act 1 is presented well, and tells the story that this planet is being destroyed by Eggman using clever design details. This level is also quite fun to play, not spending too much time on one section. Act 2 is an enemy that drops spike balls that damage you upon impact. Using this gimmick, it slows down the platforming and gives an advantage to being at the top of the level. Act 3 starts with the same enemies from Starlight Carnival that fire beams in erection on the quick step section from Act 1, adding to the level, making it more challenging and testing the player's skills. After that is a 2D section making use of the cube power, with more obstacles to increase the challenge and expand the player's skills. That section leads to the end of the level. This act uses concepts from Starlight Carnival and expands them with challenges from Planet Wisp Act 1. Act 4 begins with a drifting area that transitions into a 2D section where you must climb to the top of the factory using the skills and knowledge the player has gained from the rest of the game. This act also features some rotating platforms that the player must be fast enough to not fall off of. This is where the act ends. After Act 4, there's a cutscene with Sonic and Tails walking through the planet, talking about how it seems that Eggman is harming the planet and the aliens. Tails thinks he is transforming it into something for his theme park. Eggman then confirms this by talking about how this area is under construction and that some destruction of natural resources and capturing of aliens may occur. Then the Wisps come out to say they're concerned about the look of the planet and being dragged across the universe. Act 5 comes afterward, featuring a more difficult use of the yellow blocks from Sweet Mountain Act 6, requiring the player to conserve them so they can cross the gaps. This player expands upon the groundwork from that level really well, testing the player's knowledge of 2D platforming and the abilities of Sonic. The following, Act 5, is the last level in Planet Wisp, Act 6. Act 6 begins with a rail grinding section where the player must switch rails to avoid falling off. This is then followed by a 2D section, which uses the rotating platforms from Act 4 in this world, and a more complex version of the 2D section from Act 2, with more rail grinding afterwards. Then the player must climb to the top of the level using the Wisp to reach the end of the level. Since all 6 acts have been completed, the boss act opens. I'm sure you have been in the Sonic community if you've seen a clip of this cutscene of Sonic saying, "No copyright law in the universe is gonna stop me." As much as people make fun of this cutscene, I don't find it that bad, as some of the other lines in this game are not really as good. Like seriously, the opening for Sweet Mountain is really bad. Anyways, this boss is a repeat from the first boss from Tropical Resort, but more difficult. While not too much of an issue, this boss successfully makes the original boss more difficult, but it still manages to be really easy to beat. The cutscene that follows the boss shows Sonic talking to a broken robot, and that is about it. Nothing important happens in the cutscene, and overall, Planet Wisp does a good job of being a grassland level with its twist. The levels in this area are fun to play, although they seem like repeats from previous levels. I love the theming of Planet Wisp, and it is not a surprise it returned in Sonic Generations. The world next to Planet Wisp is Aquarium Park, an underwater world with lots of Japanese design elements. This world has some of the best music in the game that fits the world quite well. The world design for the map, although, is quite basic. When you have the ships from Starlight Carnival and the world being destroyed for Planet Wisp, the basic hexagon with water in the center is just plain boring, especially with this world having such a nice design. But the one we have is not that bad, just could be better. Act 1 starts off with a skydiving section that immediately turns into a quick step section, and then a bunch of enemies, leading to a 2D section filled with lots more enemies. After that is an area that introduces the water that is unsurprisingly found in Aquarium Park. Most of the water in the section can either be boosted over or skipped completely, which I agree with completely. There is then a slow section where the player has to wait for a platform to reach the bottom while fighting off enemies, which is followed by another quick up section and then the end of the level. Act 1 is one of the worst opening levels in all of the game, not having that big shock factor that most opening levels have. Even if that is the case, this level does a good job of introducing the water using short, easy to skip areas. Act 2 then plays around with a mix of the cube power and rotating platforms from all the way back at Tropical Resort Act 5. Having to navigate through platforms that are moved and have to be enabled by the player is quite fun. Act 3 then follows using different wisps under the water with areas dedicated to the rocket, drill, and one that hasn't even been unlocked yet. This level is nice, but the concepts could have been used in the opening level to teach the player during the introduction of the water mechanics. Act 4 starts out strong with a fast spiral that shows us a robot with big fists. This act then continues with an underwater sequence that again can be skipped, which I fully support. After a bunch of enemies in a 2D area and some difficult platforming to try to stay above the water, there are a ton of mini 2D challenges that lead to a face-off with the robot from the introduction of the level. This enemy is fun to fight, shooting lasers that work similarly to those from the flying bots all the way at the beginning of Starlight Carnival. But if the layer gets too close, they will be hit and they will lose their rings. This is a nice level that plays with the mechanics of Aquarium Park well, and has a nice ending sequence. Act 5 takes another mechanic from Starlight Carnival, that being the Yellow Spring, from Act 3. This introduction plays almost the same to that, but the platforms found in the level are completely replaced by bombs. The next segment uses an enemy that fires lasers toward the player as they ride the springs to the top, which has the end ring. Unlike the level from Starlight Carnival, this act gives you enough to worry about throughout the level, so it does not seem as boring. The next level is Act 6, which begins with an underwater area that seems just like a 2D section from Tropical Resort, except underwater. Afterwards is a 3D section that uses flowing water to force the player to stay above the water. This segment is really fun, using Wisp in good ways that challenge the player's skill. The area that follows is an arena with a bunch of enemies that have to be defeated in order to continue the rest of the level, releasing more enemies over time until all have been defeated, with an underwater area coming after that leads straight towards the end. This is an amazing level, using a large amount of more fun 3D sections that are mixed in with some nice 2D sections to make good use of the water mechanics from this level. The cutscene that comes before the boss doesn't say much, but it does comment about Eggman's sushi restaurant. The boss itself is a rework from the one from Sweet Mountain, with the entire level being underwater. The first main difference is the fact that in order to flip the lever, you have to lead a rocket to the glass covering. Once that has been done, the next part requires the player to use the drill wisp, which allows them to chase after the boss who is swimming around the water. Then the player has to do the same thing 2 more times to eventually beat the boss. While I enjoy the boss from Sweet Mountain, requiring the player to lead a bomb to the switch is quite annoying, having to backtrap a bunch in order to get the rocket to follow them. Once the boss has been defeated, a cutscene showing Tails meeting up with Sonic and telling them the sushi restaurant Dr. Eggman was talking about is really bad. Comedy, am I right? Aquarium Park is a nicely designed level with some good levels, but the bad parts stand out a lot. Other than that, I quite enjoy this world, especially the music. The last main planet in this game is Asteroid Coaster. Asteroid Coaster is a giant rock structure that looks like a skull with glowing green acid on it. The levels themselves take place inside of that rock structure that makes up the planet, with caves that are filled with that same green acid. Act 1 begins with Sonic riding a roller coaster that looks like a skeleton. As Sonic rides along the coaster, the player can jump up and collect rings and a wisp container to fill up the boost gauge. Once the player gets off the coaster, there's a quick section where the player must homing attack onto what looks like pods, and then drift around tight corners to a section that introduces the purple wisp, Frenzy. Frenzy is a power that transports Sonic into a monster that can consume objects to gain size. As they gain size, they slow down and gain control. After completing that area, there's another section with a roller coaster, followed by an area using the fans and more of the capsule homing attacks. Then leading to a section outside that has asteroids and a couple planets. There's a notable 2D area with gravity switching and one last homing attack segment that leads straight to the end of the level. Act 2 starts with the player making their way around a tower using the Frenzy Wisp along the way. Along these new obstacles that push the player out into space, but can be used as platforms. This level has Sonic run on those planets from the end of the last act to an area that uses the Frenzy Wisp, and a 2D section using the gravity from the last act in combination with the new obstacles that push the player out into space. This act truly does a good job of taking the concepts that Act 1 barely touched on and expanding upon them, while not being too short in the process. Act 3 uses the obstacles from the last act, with the Yellow Spring from Starlight Carnival Act 3 to force the player to think fast and not be defeated. Act 4 then takes the Motobug section from Starlight Carnival Act 1, but on the Ring of the Planets from the outside of Section 1, and makes it the entire level. This level is really bad, and doesn't do much, ending in the same place it started, with the level not even doing anything different. Afterwards is a cutscene where Sonic discovers where Eggman converts the wisps into negative energy that powers his mind control machine. Tails then tells Sonic that he has not seen Yacker, and that's how the cutscene ends. Act 5 uses the rotating lasers from Sweet Mountain Act 4 in tandem with a few wisp abilities, and the obstacles from Act 2 of this world. This is the fine level that barely changes or uses the concept from those acts in any new ways. Act 6 starts with the same as Act 1, but with a much longer segment, using the roller coasters in new ways, requiring the player to act fast, and jump or switch cars. This is followed by an underwater section that uses the water from Aquarium Park and the new Frenzy power. Once that section is complete, there's a quarter that requires more use of the Frenzy power in smaller spaces than before. After this is a mini-boss, which Sonic spins Sonic using the anti-gravity to make the player attack and avoid lasers. Act 6 ends the world on a high, taking the concepts from earlier levels and testing the player's abilities with them. The cutscene before the boss has Sonic taunting the boss over and over until he gives up and attacks. The boss itself is a rehash of the one from Starlight Carnival, bringing different wisps and an orange and green color scheme. The boss has a new asteroid attack that launches asteroids at the player and must avoid them and use the rocket power to attack. After the boss has been defeated, a cutscene that shows Sonic and Tails talking about how they set all the planets free and saved all the aliens is played, which shows them celebrating and talking about going home. Asteroid Coaster is a great world that has some great theming, with one of the biggest questions throughout the game being how Eggman is getting the Wisp's power. This world does a good job of showcasing that and making it the center point of the planet. Every planet is free, and Sonic and Tails are heading home, but that isn't the end of the game. Once every planet has been completed, the final world is unlocked, Terminal Velocity. Once a player opens up this world, a cutscene plays that shows Eggman talking about how he still has enough power to use the secret weapon, and that he will have the last laugh. Eggman begins to power up his machine, revealing that Tropical Resort is just one big laser gun. As the weapon powers up, the hole made by the arm that flew in after defeating the first boss causes it to implode and creates a black hole out of the negative energy that Eggman used to power the weapon. This cutscene ends with Eggman saying that he will crush Sonic. Right before Act 1, there's a cutscene that shows us Sonic and Tails did right when the machine imploded. They decide to evacuate towards the space elevator, which leads to Act 1, which takes place on the same tower the space elevator is on. The level begins with a much more segment with the enemies from Starlight Carnival Act 1. As Sonic rushes towards the Earth, and once those enemies have been defeated, a motorbug segment, like the one from Act 1 of Starlight Carnival, is there. After this, there's a section of running away from the purple robot from Aquarium Park Act 4. Except it is much faster than before. After a little bit, the motorbugs are added into the mix. And then after a little bit more, the level ends. This level is not that bad for a level, but from the last world in the game, I expected something more difficult with some platforming, or any platforming at all, along with any use of the wisps. Terminal Velocity is organized very differently from Out of the Other World, with the boss coming after Act 1. The cutscene before the boss shows Sonic and Tails right about to enter the space elevator, and Eggman interrupts them, antagonizing Sonic using amusement park puns that Sonic immediately complains about. Eggman then tells Sonic what mech he is in, and after Tails says he does not think they can beat it, Sonic pushes him into the space elevator, telling him he will see him on the ground. This boss is really good! Using the Wisp abilities, the player has used the entire game as attacks, creating cubes that the player damages on contact, lasers that hurt the player, and sending out spike balls to attack the player. Using the boost, the player can get close to the boss. After it attacks, it can attack it again until their attacks hit the place Eggman is in. Every time the player attacks Eggman, they get a wisp, and once they get all of them, an orchestral version of the main theme, Reach for the Stars, plays, and after a few more hits, the player can use the power Unlimited Colors to boost through Eggman's mech and defeat the boss. This is an amazing boss. It takes advantage of the powers the player has used to create an engaging fight with incredible music. This fight is so good, it has been used as the final boss in 2 other games. After this one, Sonic Lost World and Sonic Forces both use it as the final boss. Once the final boss is defeated, a cutscene shows Eggman getting sucked in the black hole, and Sonic is beginning to run away from it. Act 2 begins with Sonic running down the space elevator shaft away from the black hole, eventually getting pulled into it. The final cutscene plays that shows the Wisp saving Sonic and saying goodbye to Sonic and Tails. And that is how Soniccolours ends. Terminal velocity is an amazing idea, but with there only being one real level, that level isn't really that good, the world is just not executed as well as it could be. Soniccolors is an amazing game that helped single-handedly save the brand of Sonic after the disaster that was Shadow the Hedgehog, Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, and Sonic Unleashed. The game does a great job of entertaining the player with a variety of gameplay styles, challenges, and gimmicks. Although I really enjoy this game, it is not really a 3D Sonic game because it's so much more 2D than 3D. There are so many amazing things in this game with unique zone ideas, great music, and a story that is not that complicated. One often forgotten or missed feature is the multiplayer. The multiplayer lets multiple people take control of Sonic, and a simulation of the zones from the game. The multiplayer levels themselves are unlocked by collecting red rings, which are hidden in the normal stages. Collecting all of them unlocks every new level for the multiplayer. A secret you can receive from this multiplayer is once you beat every level, you unlock Super Sonic, which allows the player to move faster and to be invincible to enemies, but it takes a ring every second and kills Sonic once the ring count hits 0. The music is great, with every song fitting the game and the zone it can be found in. There are great zones such as Tropical Resort, breaking the trend of the first zone being a grassland. Starlight Carnival being one of the most visually appealing zones I've ever seen, especially for the Wii. The story you can see in the level design details of Planet Wisp and the creativity of Asteroid Coaster. Every game following this has had unoriginal zone ideas. Sonic Generation, Sonic Lost World, Sonic Forces, and even Sonic Frontiers all either have basic grass, desert, lava, or snow levels, or have reused levels from previous games. The game in recent years has divided the community because it changed how all future games are created to follow similar ideas with a similar story. I understand why people are annoyed with the designs for games, but do not blame the game for those problems. Blame the problem of it being continued. One of the most successful games so far has been Soniccolors because it did something unique with it, and that's why people enjoyed it. Soniccolors had a mostly forgotten DS release and a widely criticized remaster in the year 2021. Even after 13 years, this game is still one of my favorites. Even if this will never be as good of a game as it was when I was a child and I first played this game, I will always enjoy this game. Soniccolors has aged amazingly, still being just as good as it was before. While I will admit that this game is not perfect, there are many problems with the level design, story, and overall gameplay. Those do not overshadow the impact this game has had on me and the memories I have made with it. I still have the original save file and Wii's I used to beat the first game. I spent so much time playing this that the save file was maxed out. While I know Sonic games are going in a new direction, I hope the charm Soniccolors has can be remembered for future games. While I love this game, living in the past is not the way forward. I'll always be moving on to new horizons, and I guess new frontiers also.
Finally, we can relate. Now we're side by side, this is fate. I knew all along we'd find some way to communicate.